the academically acceptable thing to look at. Say, for example, like psi and telepathy and those kind of things. It's relatively reasonably okay to research that kind of stuff in university, but it doesn't take long before you end up, remote viewing, secret bases on the moon, or, coming into contact with Bigfoot and UFOs and all these kind of things. So that's why I like to take this kind of broad approach to the paranormal. It doesn't make sense to try and remove these elements from each other. They automatically kind of intrinsically lead into each other.
And why do you think that is? I mean, people will often accuse me of thinking it's just one thing, but I don't necessarily think it's just one thing. But I think they're connected somehow.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, and the book is not trying to say, for example, that all, ghost encounters are encounters with the spirits of the trees and things like that. It's not trying to be that kind of simplistic, but it is suggesting that there are these other strands to the mystery that need to be taken into consideration. And if we don't look at those, if we don't look at the whole picture, then we're missing out on a big chunk of it. So I'm not saying, like you're saying, that it's all necessarily one thing, but I think there is something that connects them all. And perhaps that thing that connects them all is actually, human experience and human consciousness, or something along those kind of lines.
Yeah, definitely. I think some of it is us, and that's talked about in this book a little bit too, that it's sort of a part of us externalizing, but that doesn't exclude an other from being present either.
No, exactly. Yeah, I don't think that you can exclude this other. I mean, it doesn't take long when you're looking at any kind of paranormal experience to realize that there seems to be something else going on beyond the experiencer. Because if it was all generated by the experiencer, then the phenomena that we experience would be, they would kind of make sense to us, or they would have some kind of a grounding in our knowledge and understanding if we've generated it. But in a lot of cases, paranormal experiences seem to surprise us and shock us, and to me that suggests that there's something about them that is external. Their power to shock us means that they are something other.
When you start the book, you start talking about how we've sort of lost our connection to the earth, and we hold ourselves sort of separate from it. And you point out that it was initially religion that sort of did that, but science also plays a role in that sort of a viewpoint.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In the book, I talk about how religion, through these kind of ideas, especially in the kind of monotheistic religions, ideas of kind of dominion over the creation of God, so that we're kind of like looking after it, and God has kind of moved away, and how that has led to, you could argue, looking at the history of it, the medieval church, and how all of that impacted society, that has in part led to our distancing from nature. And like you said, science has also done that with this idea of Cartesian dualism, for example, of separating ourselves from matter, basically, and making us feel as though we're detached from the natural world. But yeah, I think both science and religion have contributed to that. But also, religion especially offers a kind of another way to remedy it as well. Especially if we think about the impact of materialism and all those kind of things. Religious worldviews, with their emphasis on immateriality and the spiritual dimension to reality and all of that kind of stuff, they give us a kind of like an alternative framework for looking at the world. And I'm not trying to say again that religion is necessarily correct, or any of the religions are necessarily correct, but they do give us this alternative perspective. And one of the most interesting things that I found while researching my introduction to this book was that religious organizations, sort of in the, after these big climate meetings, had issued these declarations arguing, that if you follow a particular religion, that you should, be trying to look after the world as part of God's creation and all of this kind of stuff. But they often brought up this idea of the cosmos, or of the universe or whatever, as an expression of God's body. And when we start to think like that, we're starting to see again this like what we were talking about before, these interconnections and things coming in, that everything in the world is somehow connected. And I think that's quite a useful way of thinking about things.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, everything affects everything else. You don't have anything that stands alone in a void.
No.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so that was this kind of, the basis of the idea of greening the paranormal came from this greening of religion phenomenon that's been going on, where the world religions have slowly been coming to realize that they can have an impact with their huge demographics that they reach out to. That if people could frame their kind of pro-environmental behavior, like tackling climate change or increasing habitat for biodiversity and all those kind of things, if they could frame that within their kind of religious or their metaphysical or spiritual worldview, then it would make them want to participate more. And I think a similar kind of effect could happen with the paranormal. All of the people who are interested in the paranormal, who are engaging and thinking about these things, we could put that to use in a way. It's a bit of a crazy idea, but it's one of the ideas that I explore in the book.
Well, one of the things I liked is you said like Bigfoot hunters could, plant trees while they were out Bigfoot hunting.
Yeah. Yeah, and UFO groups set up stargazing gardens
for
biodiversity, which I think would be really good. But yeah, that's kind of like a surface approach to the issue, really, and it's not really what the book is about in itself.
But it amused me. It's not a horrible idea.
No, it's a nice idea, and it would be good if that happened.
and the thing about environmentalism is it's a win-win. Like it doesn't. You'll get this overly politicized argument about what's causing climate change, and of course there are people who deny there's climate change going on. But in the end, if we clean up the planet, it's a win-win. Even if it's not, if it turns out that climate change is happening naturally and it's not man-made, cleaning the planet is still a win.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's no, you can't really make an argument against it. It's like, you don't want to clean up the world. You don't want to clean up the oceans. You don't want to get rid of all of that plastic,
Yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of a non-point what the cause is, and we should probably stop arguing about it and wasting time and just fix things as best as we can,
things like nature connectedness and feeling as though we're a part of the natural world. It's also good for mental health and all of those kind of things. There's lots of dimensions to this that are really important to, we've got to think about it in this bigger context.
Yeah, the more deforestation and stuff like that happens, it really, it's I guess probably increasing that disconnect from ourselves in a way. I mean, if this is part of us, it's giving us a disconnect from ourselves, from the planet, from everything around us that we are intricately connected with. Yeah,
I mean, we've evolved alongside all of these different species of plants and trees and animals for thousands and millions of years, and we don't really know what it would be like to live in a world that doesn't have these the rich biodiversity that we have now. And chances are, and the way things are going, it's going to lead to some kind of a catastrophic collapse. We're not going to see the collapse happening until it's already happened, and suddenly there's no insects, there's no the trees are not being able to be pollinated anymore. Right. And all of those kinds of things. So it's just a, total system breakdown, potentially.
Yeah,
it's not good.
If one part of the system breaks, it's going to affect all the other parts of the system.
Yeah.
And that includes us.
Exactly.
And I've also, I've thrown around the speculation that what if we can't leave this planet? I mean, we're so eager to get out into space, which I'm totally for. But what if we're so connected here that getting out into space is not something we can do?
It's possible. Yeah. I mean, maybe we are, a part of the Earth in some respect. I really like the idea that we are, the universe experiencing itself, that kind of idea, that maybe we are the expression of Earth consciousness, in ourselves, which is an interesting idea.
Or the idea that we are, the universe, experiencing itself, but also growing from the inside.
Yeah.
We're not in a static system, but we're actually creating something new by existing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think, to a certain extent, that's true, isn't it? We can't really argue against it. If you take evolution and all of that kind of stuff seriously, then we really are the manifestation of the universe, going right back to the beginning of the Big Bang, when all of the matter was created or whatever. We're the end result of that flow of activity, aren't we, all the way through? So we definitely have to be the universe experiencing itself. There's no other way that it really could be.
And there's a few arguments in here on what came first, matter or consciousness. It seems most people in the book choose consciousness as the initiator.
Yeah,
which is tricky. Yeah, go ahead.
It's tricky territory, isn't it?
It makes more sense when you look at it that way, really. Like when you look at this, the reason this phenomena doesn't fit a scientific viewpoint at the moment is because science puts matter first. But if you put consciousness first, all of this stuff makes sense.
Yeah. There's again, it's part of this disconnect from nature, isn't it? It's the same issue that our worldview, based on materialism, doesn't allow for the existence of disembodied consciousness or tree spirits or anything like that. Mm-hmm. One of the most interesting things that's happening recently, and again I touch on this in the introduction though, is how modern science is in a way beginning to open up to the idea of other forms of intelligence and other forms of consciousness. And the example that I give in the introduction is the recent research on plant neurobiology.
Yeah.
And especially the work of Monica Gagliano, who basically, she concocted all of these really interesting experiments to test for things like memory in plants and perception in plants and hearing in plants and things like that. But her ideas were kind of inspired by communications she'd received from plant spirits during vision quests and things like that. So it's just interesting how, although the materialist framework of modern science has detached us from nature, it's also in a way now, with these new avenues of science opening up the possibility for us to reconnect again. So now that science reveals to us that plants do indeed have some kind of a sentience and consciousness, now we can begin to interact with them on that level and build up a new relationship. So, science it's not all bad.
Well, no, definitely not.
No.
It's just a little stuck in its own paradigm, I think, is what happens. And that's because of the way grants and stuff like that work. If you're not, if you're not following the status quo, or you're challenging it, or you're not producing definitive results, you don't get funded.
Yep, it's true.
So it's not the science, no. It's the system.
It's the system. It's the culture that dictates what's going on within the system.
Yeah.
Because if we change the overall, the overall assumptions, if we move towards a non-physical or a consciousness first model, then science would have to adapt and change and be very interesting.
Yeah, who knows what they'd figure out then?
Yeah.
I mean, considering what we figured out from what potentially could be the wrong model.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even if a consciousness first model is not correct in the long run, it still might open up some interesting, take us down some interesting routes anyway. So it's worth taking a moment to consider it seriously, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something people don't always realize, is the more ways you view something, the more you're going to get out of it.
Mm-hmm.
If you come across it only one way, you're only going to see that one way. You're going to miss other stuff. And I think that's part of the problem with a lot of paranormal research, is that these groups, like the Bigfoot hunters think the UFO people are crazy, and the UFO people think the ghost hunters are crazy, and the ghost hunters think the Bigfoot people are crazy. And it's like, there's probably interconnection here. You guys are missing,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And that's it. With the ghost hunters, when you start to research